Hello and welcome back to my channel and an unexpected part 6 of my series, Living with a Tao Tao. Well, it finally happened. I had my first official breakdown. But I like to say a broken part is just an opportunity for improvement. So let's get started. So I was headed home from work one fine Monday evening when this happened. 1,595 kilometers on the odometer, and I'm starting to get a really weird noise out of the front brake. Front wheel spins fine, and I don't have any slack in the wheel bearings or anything, but I'm going to start the motor up and show you. When I am moving and I apply the front brake, I get this really scary sounding growl. That's making me wonder if I should even ride this home or if I should go get a truck and tow it home. So let me show you what that's like. Yep, that sounds to me like probably a wheel bearing. I'm gonna limp it home real slow and pull it apart, I guess. Looks like I spoke too soon. It seems to be a problem with the brake line. You can see there it's been rubbing on the tire the whole time. And that is because the little retainer has broken off. So I am going to have to order a new brake line, and I'm going to down this vehicle until I get one because it's not safe to operate it without a front brake. What a drag. So I guess I'll limp it home with rear brake only and hope for the best. And that, my friends, is why you always carry zip ties and you would never ignore strange sounds. No more sound. Except for that clunking. When I got home, I immediately ordered a new brake line from scooterworks.com. Now, I understand there's a lot of different sites you can buy Chinese scooter parts from, but my life literally rests in this part. So I wanted to make sure that it came from a website with a good reputation and a reputation for quality parts. Now, I have to say, I have been enjoying my vacation from the Tao Tao. But it's time to get back on this pony. So without further ado, alright, so let me walk you through what I got set up here. I've got all my panels off, brake line exposed. I've got a little vacuum pump here with a little reservoir on it, and then I'm going to catch my brake fluid in. That's hooked up to the bleed screw on the nipple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this lid off the master cylinder. Two things about that. One, when you work on these master cylinders, you need to use a JIS number 2 screwdriver, not a Phillips. JIS, that's Japanese industry standard. Number 2 will grip this fastener great and it won't strip it. So I'm going to take this off, crack the bleeder, suck the brake fluid out. That way when I disconnect my brake line, it's not going to go all over the floor. Oh, also, it's a good idea to have the master cylinder leveled out. So if it's like this, it's tipping down, and when you take this off, you could spill over the handlebars, and I don't know, it's bad for the paint. It's bad to clean up later. Do yourself the favor and do a clean job the first time. Okay, I can feel tension building up in the comment section already. Let me just tell you why I did it that way. When you pump these master cylinders on a lot of these Chinese scooters, the return action of the piston actually will squirt some brake fluid up out of the bleed hole. And without the top on that, that can just like squirt into your garage and go anywhere. So yes, you can do it that way. It would have been fine. But on a lot of these cheaper master cylinders, it'll make a big mess. So I prefer to use the suction method. Anyway, so we have that drained. Now we are going to remove the brake lines. Now I expect this to be messy again, so let me get a dish. And we'll take it from the bottom first and then move on to the top. All right, now I guess I can cut the zip tie and take the brake line off. All right, and there's the damage from the tire rubbing the brake line. So this really looks like it's been rubbing for quite some time. I don't know why it all of a sudden started making that loud noise. I can't imagine I didn't hear it before. But I'm glad I caught it before it ruptured and before I ended up on the back of someone's car. And here is my replacement part. It is a Blue Line OEM replacement parts. That's kind of a funny thing. Usually OEM replacement parts mean you're getting like the top quality stuff. This one I really hope it's better than OEM because, well, we saw what happened. Oh, you know what? It actually does feel like it's a pretty high quality line. It's like, it's got a really nice texture and it's pretty firm. I don't know if that's braided inside or what, but here it is next to the old part. I mean, the old part is like old school rubber brake line, you know, just like you'd see on a old Buick Century or something. And this is like pretty nice stuff that you might find on a nicer motorcycle. So I think in this case, yeah, it is better than OEM. Nice. Very important that you don't damage your little brass washers. They're brass on the outside and they have some sort of rubberized seal on the inside. All right, to ensure that that doesn't happen again, I've actually installed this brake line with a bit of an outboard bias to the caliper. And what that's doing is kind of giving this brake line just a little bit of a bend so it's away from the front tire and it's not going to collapse in. I think what was going on is as my weight was transferred to the front of the scooter and the suspension went upwards, this brake line was actually being pushed into the tire. That's why when I got off the scooter and spun the tire, I couldn't hear anything. But when I rode the scooter, I heard it constantly. All right, so here's my setup. I've got my bleed screw loose and I've got my little canister hooked up. And I'll come up here, pour a little bit of brake fluid into the master cylinder. .4 is what the cap recommends. And I'll do a bit of a gravity bleed and then I'm gonna fully bleed the brakes. Looks like it's not quite flowing yet, so maybe I'll give it a little bit of assistance. There we go. Now it's running. Pour a little bit more in. All right, now I'm gonna do the old pump and bleed. I'm gonna tighten this bleed screw. Give it a very, very slow pump. And then I'm going to crack it. Tighten it again. I'll bring the pan over and make a little bit of a mess so you can see. All right, I've got the lever held down and I'm just going to crack the bleed screw. See how the brake fluid just kind of moseys out of there? I don't really have good pressure yet. And I can feel up in the master cylinder, I don't actually have good pressure on the lever. But we know that the brake caliper is full of fluid and we know the line is full of fluid. We just know we have air in the system. So what we need to do is go up top, bleed at the master cylinder, then bleed at the caliper, and then bleed at the bleeder screw. All right, so we're gonna build pressure in the master cylinder by squeezing the lever a bunch of times, and then we're gonna crack the banjo bolt here. Now, the whole point of this is to get any air out of the master cylinder, because if you get air here, it's really hard to push it all the way down through the whole line. This is always a really nerve-wracking thing to do on someone else's bike, because it is basically letting brake fluid out of the master cylinder, and you don't want it on anybody's paint or any plastic panels, because this brake fluid will just ruin everything. So I always wrap a rag around everything and try and catch as much as I can, and I have brake clean nearby just in case it gets out of hand. So put this in there. We'll pump up the lever a few times, nice and slow so it doesn't squirt out, and break it loose. Real slow. Okay, nothing came out that time. We'll go again. Break it loose again. Tighten it. And again. There we go. Now we're getting some brake fluid out of it. That's good. Oh yeah, and the pressure is definitely improving here at the lever. Well, I kind of heard it sizzle that time. That's a good sign. All right, and that should be enough to go downstairs and bleed it some more. I do want to show this to people though, so you don't think that I was just jerking your chain about brake fluid squirting out of the master cylinder. Watch this. See that? It jumps right out. It's all over your plastics. It's going to run down on the floorboards. Now, I don't really like to bleed the brake system with my little vacuum pump, because you get false negatives out of the vacuum pump. Because as air kind of sucks around the bleeder screw, it looks like you still have air in the line, but you actually don't. So I always bleed my brakes by hand, making sure I always have good pressure here, and I'm usually a little bit more careful than this. Crack open the bleeder. Oh yeah, see how much just squirted out there? That was a lot better. I hope you could see that. As you go, it's fun to kind of chase the bubbles out of the master cylinder too, when you just barely pull the lever in. See all the bubbles that just came out there? That's not even a full stroke. Just that little bit of a crack sometimes just lets them right out. All right, so I've got good firm pressure here on the brake lever, and I've got most of the brake fluid that I spilled all over the headset cleaned up. So it's time to throw the panels back on and hit the road. All right, and just like that, we're all back together. Front brake has plenty of pressure and the new line looks great, safely routed away from the front tire. And I wanted to make a few points in the closing of this video. Now the first one is, I know this wasn't a typical breakdown where like a connecting rod comes through the engine case, right? But it was a breakdown in the fact that I wasn't comfortable riding the scooter anymore. And it's not just because I needed a vacation. But honestly, I didn't feel comfortable operating this scooter with a compromised brake line. The front brake is responsible for the majority of the braking of the scooter. You know, on the racetrack, I barely touch the rear brake, and that's usually if I've just gone off course. The next point I want to make is, I don't think I've ever seen this failure in a name brand scooter, maybe ever, but certainly not under 1,000 miles. Now I know this was just a failure of a really small part and it might be kind of a freak accident, but I feel like other manufacturers make sure that they make those little crucial retainers in a way that they're not going to break ever. And the final thing I want to say is my new jet kit did arrive, and I could have rejetted the carburetor while the scooter was down, but there was one last experiment I wanted to run. Now, there has been a lot of speculation in the comments section as to why my scooter is running so lean. And a lot of people are talking about the fuel that I use. Now, mostly I have been running 87 octane in the scooter. I did run a tank of 93 octane, but there was not a substantial difference in fuel mileage or performance or the spark plug. But a lot of people are talking about the ethanol content of the fuel here. Now, a lot of people speculate that the ethanol burns hotter or not as cleanly or, a lot of things. And why I don't see any reason why those things will be true. I'm a man of science, so let's do an experiment. I found a gas station that sells ethanol-free gasoline. It even comes out of a separate hose, so there's no contamination at all. And I'm gonna run a final tank in this scooter on ethanol-free gasoline, and we'll check the spark plug. And if the spark plug reads fine, I'll eat my hat and I'll subtract the cost of the jet kit from the part sheet. I guess the carburetor rejet will come after my 1,000 mile review. I'm at 1,616 kilometers, and that means I am 4 kilometers away from 1,000 miles. So I will hit the 1,000 mile mark on my way to work tomorrow. And I have a lot to say for my 1,000 mile review. So look forward to that next week. And until then, I'll be living with a Tao Tao.